August 1929 in Palestine. Arabs riot. Jews are massacred. The Haganah, a self-defense force set up in 1920 to defend the Yishuv, or Jewish community of Palestine, fails to stop the slaughter. In protest, some Haganah officers, led by Deputy Commander of the Jerusalem District, Avraham Tahomi, set up a rival organization which will become known as the Irgun, or Etzel. In 1936, the Arabs riot again, but this time the Irgun senior officers, Tahomi among them, feel unity is needed and return to the Haganah fold. However, two young Irgunists, David Raziel and Abraham Stern, lead the Irgun's junior officers and most of the rank and file in a decision to remain independent. Unlike the Haganah, the Irgun is under the authority of no political group, but answers directly to Vladimir Ze'ev Jabotinsky. Many of its members come from Betar, a youth group Jabotinsky founded in the 1920s. Indeed, the third verse of the Betar song written by Jabotinsky is eventually adopted by the Irgun as its anthem. Under Raziel, the Irgun abandons the Jewish community's official policy of havlagah, or self-restraint. Raziel says of havlagah,
"Such a method of defense that allows the enemy to attack at will, to reorganize and attack again, ends in downfall and destruction. Whoever does not wish to be beaten has no choice but to attack."
On November 14, 1937, known as Black Sunday, the Irgun responds to a wave of Arab attacks, with a series of attacks of its own. 6 months later, 3 Irgun members decide to avenge the murder of Jewish passengers in a taxi by firing on an Arab bus. Although no one is hurt, the British spark Jewish outrage by hanging one of the Irgun members, 25-year-old Shlomo ben Yosef. His fearlessness in the face of death makes him the Irgun's first hero and martyr. Following the 1939 White Paper that bars Palestine to desperate European Jews, the Irgun launches a series of attacks on British installations. But with the start of World War II on September 5th, these attacks come to an abrupt halt. Jabotinsky announces his full support for the British in the war against the Nazis, and David Raziel, then imprisoned by the British in the Sarafan detention camp, endorses the decision. The British release Raziel, who is killed in 1941 on a British intelligence sabotage mission against the Nazi-inspired uprising of Rashid Ali in Iraq. The Irgun drifts until it is taken over in December 1943 by Menachem Begin. Begin was Betar's leader in Poland. Imprisoned by the Soviets, he is eventually released and joins the Free Polish Army, with which he makes his way to Palestine. In the words of historian J. Bauer Bell,
Begin appeared a most unlikely underground leader. He was no gunman, no hard man on the run, no poet of revolution, no splendid figure ripe for legend. In fact, he was not physically prepossessing, and was described in the British Jewish Terrorist Index as having a long, hooked nose, bad teeth, and horn-rimmed spectacles.
In February 1944, when it is clear that victory over Hitler is a matter of time, Begin issues a proclamation of revolt against the British.
"This, then, is our demand: immediate transfer of power in Eretz Israel to a provisional Hebrew government. There will be no retreat, freedom, or death."
The British are dismissive. Thomas Wilkin of the Criminal Investigation Department, or CID, tells his superiors,
"There is nothing to worry about."
But the Irgun attacks CID headquarters, killing 6 CID officers. In his Irgun history, Days of Fire, Samuel Katz, who would become a member of the Irgun High Command, writes,
"The British reacted with intensive searches for suspects and for the underground's radio transmitter. They made large-scale arrests and imposed heavy sentences."
But the sharpest attacks on the Irgun come from the Jewish leaders, who still hope for a change in British policy after the war. Hostility is so great that in October 1944, the Jewish agency orders the Haganah to open a training course for 170 men to wage an anti-Irgun campaign, which will become known as the season, as in hunting season. A month later, on November 6, 1944, British resident minister in the Middle East, Lord Moyne, is assassinated. Although he is killed by Lehi, not the Irgun, the Jewish agency uses his death to step up its assault on the Irgun, handing its members over to the hated British CID. J. Bauer Bell writes,
The Haganah was not simply turning people into the British, but interrogating them first. Fingers broken in door hinges, regular beatings, burns, threats. The season was cruel, often vicious, and clearly effective.
In less than a year, there is a sea change. Bitterly disappointed when a Labour victory in England does not change Britain's anti-Zionist policy, the Haganah joins in November 1945 with both the Irgun and Lehi in the United Resistance, attacking railroads, refineries, and other targets. But after 91 people die when the Irgun bombs a section of the King David Hotel that houses the British Secretariat, the Haganah disavows all responsibility, virtually ceases military operations, and the United Resistance movement ends. The Irgun forges ahead. In March 1947, despite the imposition of martial law, the Irgun carries out 16 major operations. Katz writes,
Each blow delivered in Palestine had its immediate echo in the House of Commons. Winston Churchill did not mince words.
100,000 Englishmen are being kept away from their homes and work for a senseless, squalid war with the Jews.
After the Irgun carries out a spectacular breakout from Acre prison fortress in May 1947, the British sentence 3 Irgun members recaptured during the operation to death. The Irgun captures 2 British sergeants and warns that if Irgun members are to hang, so will the sergeants. The British refuse to back down. The Irgun keeps its word. The cruel act sends shockwaves through England. Britain's Parliament meets in special session. Most demand early evacuation from Palestine. Years later, Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, who had headed the rival Lehi, pays tribute to Begin.
Begin was the man because of whom the British left Eretz Israel. Had he not come in the early 1940s, there wouldn't have been a real war with the British, and they wouldn't have been chased out of Israel. Lehi alone wouldn't have succeeded, and neither would the Irgun without Begin.